Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Kean, and I am hugely invested in the conversation we're about to have emotionally, professionally, legally. And this is the first male panel I've ever hosted, which in any other situation would be an absolute blunder on my part, because I am co-founder of DICE, which stands for Diversity and Inclusion at Conferences and Events. And one of our goals is to get rid of the manel or wannel. But today, this setup felt appropriate. I'm also a proud, realistic feminist and believe we must engage men in the journey so that they can do the work with us. I am joined by three great men who have already acted in the pursuit of true equality and fairness for all women. And I do mean all women. This conversation must and will consider the experiences of Black and brown women, working class women, the LGBTQ plus community, disabled women, women over 50, for crying out loud. This session acknowledges those complexities. So, how can men be better advocates for women? Are they even advocates at all right now? Are we all just selfish, indulging in lip service everywhere? Will we ever get there? And who is holding us back? I hope these men are all as frustrated with the slow pace of change as me. Welcome, Bennett, Alex, and Danielle. Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.
I tripped over my words a little bit there. I'm very embarrassed. But it's important to show vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Could you all introduce yourselves by saying who you are, but more importantly, the role you play in the fight for equality? And it is a fight, of course. And was there a moment for you where it clicked? Alex, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. Many thanks, Amy. My name is Alex Prout. Let's see where to start. I'm the husband of Susan. I'm the father of three wonderful daughters, Lucy, Chessie, and Christiana. I work at a wonderful firm called Nuveen, where I run international for them. And how did I become an advocate? Obviously, I'm surrounded by women all the time. There's a good photo of my lovely family. But I think I jumped into advocacy with both of my feet, probably a little bit too late in life. Unfortunately, when my middle daughter, Chessie, was a victim of sexual assault, and I got to see firsthand what happens when there is disparity in terms of how we respect individuals, how we treat other people. My daughter was a victim at her school, St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire. School that I went to, and she was a victim of a game of sexual conquest by some seniors called the Senior Salute at the school. And through this, I learned what every victim of sexual violence experiences. They experience the feeling of isolation, the feeling of blame and shame, and the feeling of not being believed. So through that experience, myself, my wife, my entire family have become advocates to help victims of sexual violence.
Thank you, Alex. And obviously, I've seen so many interviews with Chessie online. I'm just in awe. I mean, she's just a pure hero. So thank you so much to her as well. And thank you for being a part of this today. Danielle, I'd love to hear from you next.
Yeah, hi. And it's hard to follow, Alex. I mean, I think I've also seen some of the work you're doing, which is absolutely fabulous. So thank you for being here. It's an honor for me to be here. So my story is much more versed within the workplace. So I'm co-founder of Utopia, which is a culture change business. We help business deliver more inclusive, more entrepreneurial and healthier workplaces. My story really, and why I founded Utopia 3 years ago to a certain extent, is about 9 years ago, I found myself at a dinner. I actually organised a dinner with a good friend of mine, Laura Jordan Bamback, to recruit people to a community that I managed called Creative Social. And I walked into this room, of which, again, I'd organised. It wasn't a surprise. I walked into a room with 12 women in it. So I was looking to recruit more female creative directors to our group called Creative Social. And something then happened to me that some people still don't believe happened to me, but something happened to me that never really happened to me in my career, which is I lost my confidence. And so all of a sudden I walked into this room, and that confidence, kind of the magic hand came and pulled away my confidence. And then as soon as I sat down for dinner, the conversations that were happening around me made me feel even further away from the group. And actually, when I got up to speak, again, I was hosting this dinner. Laura, who's one of my best friends, totally cut me off and has never done so since. And it was really that experience that got me. And I have many privileges, but one of those privileges is it took me until I was 39 to experience being in the out group. And all of those things that I'd heard that women had faced either in senior leadership or in the boardroom, all of a sudden I experienced it and it horrified me. And it horrified me because I was so blind to it. So off the back of that experience, and also off the back of experiencing I think people feeling attacked because of gender equality, and what happens when you feel attacked, you actually feel like you need to defend yourself. Is I came back and along with 3 women, we set up something called Token Man, and Token Man is an initiative to help inspire men to become inclusion makers in the workplace. So it's all about creating safe spaces where men can actually share, speak openly, increase their own understanding, their own education, so they can become better allies to everyone in the workplace, and actually create cultures in which people can equally thrive.
Lovely stuff. And you're not the Token Man today.
I'm not.
Cracking. Bennett, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's really humbling to be part of this sort of situation where, we get to show up as advocates and accomplices for women and just a more equitable society. So I am. My day job, I am a creative director and content strategist in the media and marketing world. And, hard to call it on the side when, purpose and passion align, but I'm the co-founder of this organization called 600 and Rising. It is an advocacy group for Black talent in advertising and public relations. And I'm a founding partner of Allyship in Action, which is a platform dedicated to moving corporate America to take action in issues of consequence, especially racial and gender equity in the workplace. So how did I get tied up in, caring about women? I feel like we all should care about women, right? I think it's, I could go as early as saying, when you're bullied in school by other guys by not being the most masculine person in the room, you end up really seeing who your friends are. And throughout my life, it's literally just, it's been women. I've been humbled to, my sister turns 25. She graduates law school in the spring. My stepmom's a lawyer. Very, very strong presences in my life. When it came to the ad world, when you are marginalized, I am the only Black person on this chat. Like, marginalization just, I don't want to say feels natural, but it is a part of the experience. It is part of the American experience, unfortunately. And, I've just made sure that as I go through my career and, look out for people in topics of consequence, I make sure to look out for everybody, in the roles of what I do at 600 and Allyship in Action. It's holding space and showing up for a lot of the issues that don't just affect a certain race, but things that specifically affect women in the workplace, especially, in this time of racial unrest. Lots of, we're still in the Me Too era, and that's important for us. And this remote work situation, stuff can happen online, stuff can happen on Zoom calls. So being able to advocate and push for better workplaces, how to show up better as leaders, those are the things I, just try to focus on.
So I want to stay on you.
Okay.
Actually, I went to your event, and whew, how was it? It was good. I love an event that's uncomfortable sometimes, and wowzers, there were a lot of really, really important conversations that took place.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversations, really important ones that have taken place over the last 12 months. There's a lot of conversations happening at this event over 3 days. I think we've got 50 of them, but there's been a lot of people recognizing and acknowledging their privilege in various different ways and promising to do more. Now, I want to start very simply. Bennett, you're founder of Allyship and Action. What is your definition of an ally when it comes to women? Because I want to make sure for all the men who are watching that they are sure.
Great. And my co-founder, my fellow founding partners, Nate and Steffi and Amy, they're very, very, I guess, they're clear about how I view allies. I feel like we call ourselves allyship and action for a reason, because you cannot have allyship without action. You cannot just talk the talk. You have to just show up. You have to listen. You have to, step back if you need to, or take someone's side if you need to, and not just look at something as a business imperative or nice to have. It's just really like how it should be. It's funny. Like, I was like, this is an all male panel. One of our first events I moderated an event where it was just all white leadership, and it's crazy what happens when you hold the floor for individuals to just get real about the situation, about, how they don't just, it's interesting. It's Martin Luther King Day. So I look at how brands are approaching such a interesting racial issue in an interesting racial time. And, with everything happening, with brands trying to react, with government trying to figure out how to approach this new America, how to hold better space for women, making sure that people feel like it is okay to understand that, like, what got us here was not the right way. The way where there's this huge gender pay gap, where people feel unsafe in the workplace, where, we get to talk about the glass ceiling and breaking it at, in different ways and means, and how this develops into how women end up showing themselves in the workplace. We're past the whole lean in era, and we're just like, how can we get men to to tap into their sensitivity, their vulnerability, and just allow for better conversations, allow for better actions, and taking a step further from just saying, I stand with you on these issues, but in the words of Congressman John Lewis, the late Congressman Lewis, like, being about the good trouble, being about the action, being about, like, showing up and not needing to take credit for it.
Yeah. Well, I think we need a lean in for men, or maybe lean in should have been written for men in the first place. Right. So Alex, I want to move on to you, and I want to talk about the challenge with making some people care. Now, sometimes I wonder whether I'm preaching to the converted when I talk about equal rights, when I talk to certain men who are already advocates and they're already doing so much work. All three of you are today. A few days ago, I put a call out onto Twitter to actually ask men, ask all the men that are out there, do you consider yourself an ally? Do you consider yourself an advocate? I only got a few negative responses, which was amazing considering it was Twitter. But there was one thing that I heard a few times. As a husband and a father, I think this. I think that women should be protected. Do you think you have to be a husband and a father to get it? I'm a daughter and a girlfriend, and I know that men deserve respect. Why do you think men say this a lot?
I think that is a fantastic question. And it's been something that's always frustrated me when, having gone through our experience, 6 years ago with our daughter, and then seeing Me Too happen, and then hearing all these men go on to media, and every single one would start it out by saying, I'm a father of daughters, or I'm a husband. And these are universal issues in terms of what we should care about. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and I think we spend so much time and energy as societies. I'm a bicultural person. My mother is Japanese, my father is Irish American, and I've traveled all around the world, for personal purposes, but also for work. And we spend so much time with our societies, our structures, in terms of self-identifying and differentiating. We don't spend enough time understanding the universality that we at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all bleed red. We should all care about each other. And, I have seen so much wonderful progress, slow progress being made in some areas, but it's always been interesting to me. When it comes to gender is one of the slowest and the last, great frontiers where there just seems to be such difficulty and challenges getting, breakthroughs. And, this is something we really need to study. When I look at the workplace as an example, we all understand through data now that diversity, having diverse workforces mean we have better workforces, that we're going to have more productive and therefore profitable corporate entities. Yet bringing diversity into the workplace has been such slow progress. I'm not sure if it was Bennett or Danielle that we brought up the topic of the gender pay gap. By statistics, it's going to take us, more than decades to close the gender pay gap. We don't have a level playing field in the corporate space. And what I put that all to is the old white male privileged universe sees things going in a different direction and has done everything humanly possible to maintain what has been a very protected and privileged position, for centuries.
What do you actually wonderfully led me to my next question. What do you say to those men?
So, I have temptations to say things in a very direct way because, obviously we've seen what all of these tippings can do. When you don't have a level playing field, you have differentiations of power. And what my daughter went through is absolutely, most people think rape is a crime of sex. It isn't. It's a crime of power. And when you have these power differentials, you have these circumstances where terrible, things can happen. And, we really need to fight to, diffuse these power differentials. So although I'm tempted to take a sledgehammer to them, I've learned that I need to reach people because my goal is to bring change. So I've created a mantra to myself that I've tried to live by, which is to listen, learn, and act. When our family experienced sexual violence, we did not, there wasn't a playbook for us. We didn't understand what to do, how to take care of our daughter, how to address the criminal justice system, how to bring the change that's necessary to have happen. So, I did a lot of listening and I tried to learn. But probably most importantly, I then had to find out a productive way to convert that into action. And my engagement with people, whether it's a London taxi driver, whether it's speaking to people at cocktail parties, or speaking even in the workplace, I try to bring awareness to people, get them to listen. Hopefully, some of it absorbs, and there's a little bit of learning, and then to force action. to compel action, because I think we're at a point now, whether it's because of the last 4 years politically in our country, whether it's the summer of social injustice, and having that in our face and become very blatantly obvious. And 4 years into Me Too, it's clear nothing's going to change if we sit on our behinds. We need to take action. And what's lovely to see is, I'm part of the older generation now, but it's so lovely to see our younger generations just being frankly upset, and looking to upturn and change things. But if we don't reach the older white male privilege set, nothing is going to change in our lifetimes, because unfortunately that's where a lot of the power resides.
I teach I teach art, history of art at university, and I must say I absolutely concur with you. I teach 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. The next generation has a sensitivity and a respect that blows me away. They give each other trigger warnings in conversation in case anyone feels uncomfortable. It's remarkable. Daniele, I'd like to move on to you now. I don't know if you've read it, there's an amazing article in The Onion. The Onion, which is like the parody site. Good, I need to read this. The headline is the headline is "Man Finally Put in Charge of Struggling Feminist Movement." It's an article from 2012, but it absolutely still applies. And the main point of the article, I mean, obviously The Onion is always very close to the bone. The main point of the article is that only men can convince other men. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't think at all. I think it's a discussion that we all need to be in that discussion. And to be honest with you, when I started Token Man 8 years ago, it just felt that men weren't being allowed into that discussion. It was quite difficult for men to get into that discussion. And if I look at what we've really done over and to be honest with you, the first 4 years for Token Man was very focused on the allyship discussion. And I think the allyship discussion is really important, but I think sometimes it gets lost. And definitely listening to Bennett and Alex, I don't suggest in any second they think that, but what we have to understand as allies, and they have talked about it, which is it is about action, but it's also understanding what action will have the biggest impact. And I think if we look at the workplace, I can't tell you how many businesses we go into that when you first say to them, do you have a dominant culture? They will say no. And when you get to the end of the process that we put them through, it's not without fail. It will depend on the businesses, but I will say a majority will come out recognizing that they have a dominant white male culture. And it's that culture that needs to change. And so I think Bennett talked about it. He talked about leadership quite early on. He talked about, I loved what you said, Bennett, about stepping back, the need to step back. And, I think if you look at my own career and what I've had to do and how I've had to change myself, I still have to step back more to give our team more opportunity to speak forward. And I think that part of my journey over the last 8 years has been understanding how my privilege does impact my own, everything that happens to me on a daily basis, and that I don't have the same barriers that many other people have. And that means that I need to go in and I need to be supportive of doing that. So I think, so for the first 4 years, it was about allyship. And then I'm just going to take, it's interesting how, and again, I'm talking to you at a Token Man level, at a Utopia level, we do look at things much more holistically, and we'll look at inclusion first, and then we'll start looking at diversity, and as you say, all of the diversities. But I picked up this book. It's a beautiful book my lovely wife bought me just before I got married on the 28th December 2012. And I hadn't picked it up for about 4 years, which I should have done because it was all about me, and it says really nice things. And then I came to this page here, and as I said, I hadn't read it for 4 years. And it said, the time I felt closest to you was 2011 was our annus horribilis. You've always shown strength, and I've always admired that about you. But this was the year I saw something I'd never seen in you before, and that was your vulnerable side. It doesn't come out very often, and all I want to do is look after you. 2011 was the year my brother died, and it's as you can tell, it's had quite a big impact on me. And But reading that just really got me thinking, because, the truth was, for 4 years, we were finding it hard to engage men. And I think the reality was, what I started to realize is that we needed to understand a bit more and actually connect with men in a way to understand the challenges they face, so that we can actually start to get them to understand that when we look at challenges to society and we look at challenges to culture, actually, if we look at the patriarchy actually damages everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need to do is actually start to get people to understand the importance of inclusive leadership and what it means to be a leader now. And I think, Alex talked about it exactly right. I mean, Alex was right. We have, and I still have, we're a culture change business. So what we can't do is we have to bring people on a journey. And I think it's really important to bring people on that journey. And so what we have to start understanding is that those cultures need to change, but also we need to start understanding what language and how we can help men make that change. And it's really interesting. A quote I heard 2 years ago was, in order to emancipate women, we need to liberate men. Which is really interesting, because what it's just recognizing is that that a change does need to happen. I actually had the honor of interviewing Josh Connolly, who is a resilience coach on International Men's Day, and he talks about how he sees how the current society really puts a straitjacket on men being who they really should be. And so I think just understanding that, to your point about does it need to be men leading the church? 100% not. But I think we all need to understand what changes need to be made. And coming back to that question you asked Alex, what I tend to say to men is not only get them to understand the benefit that not only they will get, but everyone else will get. But also, I truly believe this, when I speak to leaders, if they don't start changing and they don't start, start embracing skills like culture intelligence, vulnerability, and empathy, they won't have jobs in 3 years. I like to believe that, but it's certainly what the change that we're trying to make within business.
Thank you, Daniele, for all of that response. And it's amazing that this whole session, you're all showing this vulnerability that I was hoping would play out in this conversation. So thank you very much. I want to open this next question up to all three of you, because we're going to talk about the workplace. Obviously, you've all worked, and to more or lesser extent, I don't know, but it's a really important area. And like I said at the beginning, different women experience different things, and I do recommend for the viewers at home or wherever you are, this is a very good book, because it provides a really nice introduction to men, for men, to intersectional bias. So intersectionality, we assume that everyone knows what that is. At home, everybody does know what it is. It's a term that's been around for 30 years, coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. It applies to the different experiences of people with their multiple identities, but it was originally coined to describe the experiences of Black women. We can go in whatever order you fancy, but what different experiences have you all noticed of different women in the workplace, and what have you, as advocates for women, done to address those different experiences? Bennett, I haven't spoken to you.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about all the lenses I could come at it from. When I was working agency side, I was very close with the team at the 3% conference, and just learning about how better to show up, because I don't think I really had the tools as a junior creative. It was, it's easy to see the struggle as a Black person, but then to understand the experiences of of women in general, and then find that intersection, right? Like how Black women, Black queer people, and even the trans community, they go through such a similar ostracizing or state where men like me have to step up. you know, already like being, you know, within the margins, and I brought that up, was just like, you have to align with those who are also going through some sort of similar trauma, like similar experiences. And then when I was a journalist, I happened to cover a lot of when Me Too hit the ad industry really hard. And it was a privilege being somebody who had already worked agency side, who already knew, you know, what the workplaces were like. You know, they are still very Mad Men era toxic environments. So to be that, to be a source where, you know, just holding the floor for women to talk, making sure it goes through the right sources. And, you know, I'm covering it from the trade side. You have people like Ronan Farrow who are like blowing stories wide open. So there is a level of care in how, you know, when somebody approaches you, you know, it's not just the simple 2 words, believe women. You know, it is unpacking your privilege, unpacking your understanding of, you know, how the world works, because your experience is not going to be theirs. You know, like their reality, their life experience is just as valid as yours. You know, and then just making sure you are, you know, if you do happen to report, you know, on this, you know, publicly as a journalist, or even as somebody who has a means to do some sort of reconciliatory or disciplinary actions, thinking along the lines of what is the best method of safety for, you know, for my peer, for my female peer. And then, you know, with the advocacy work now, 600 and Rising, and, you know, allyship in action. 600 and Rising is full out advocacy work. You know, how can we look out for the best interests of Black talent, and within that, the most marginalized? Our organization started with an open letter. Over 600 Black people signed a letter and said the industry needs to change. You know, it's bigger than a pay gap. It was quality. It was bigger than hiring Black people. It was bigger than hiring Black women and paying them more. It was like making sure that they have more opportunities to reach the top of the corporate ladder, you know, and, you know, not just caring about numbers like hiring and representation, but the quality of life. Because if you're not checking to see how people are feeling, whether this is a place that they themselves can work at, much less tell somebody to work at as well, then you're doing something wrong. You know, I left a note, and I know there's a private chat with everybody, but there was something that Alex was talking about, and then Danielle as well. And, you know, doing the work to show up for women also means you have to learn how best to show up for men who are in their own way. So many of us are in our own fucking way. And, you know, I get to be in more of an independent place where in this arc of my career, where I can be a little bit more militant about it. Like so many of us haven't healed from our own traumas. And so many of us still get to run the world in so many different aspects. And, you know, that takes an unpacking. There is so much unlearning that needs to be done there, you know, and even if you feel like you have it good, you know, when all the Black squares happened back in June, when people were, you know, posting up diversity numbers and hitting me up like 6 months ago, like, how can I be a better white person? You know, like, it really means like going through history and like really, really unpacking it, you know, really unpacking that maybe you haven't had any sort of traumas, but like in doing this work, this is heavy work. This is heavy work. Like, Alex, so much respect to you and your family. Danielle, like, so much respect for everything that you've built to make us like tap into our vulnerability, like be more candid about, you know, how we can just be better. You know, yeah, don't mean to cut you off.
But we need to honestly talk about this for hours and hours, but I need to get to the actions part.
Of course.
So Amy, can I just build on what Bennett's just
Absolutely. Bear in mind, 10 minutes left.
No. So I'm going to talk about the action. I think, firstly, Bennett, I think it's really interesting because, as I said, I've spent my whole career, or most of my career, talking not being empathetic enough. But then people haven't really dug under that or be empathetic about why is it that I struggle to be empathetic. So that's where you talk about, Amy, you asked what the role is. I think there is a role for everyone to start understanding the journey people can go on your action thing. And I'm going to pick up on what Alex said, because I thought it was super, as Alex said, from the first thing he did was start listening. And I think, the work that we've been doing over the last 3 years is one of the first things we do when we go into our clients is we hold listening sessions. So we hold sessions to allow people to talk about their realities so that we can then start building strategies that actually will actually start to unblock those barriers. And I think part of those strategies is education. I mean, there's a huge education piece that needs to be done. I mean, if I look at, I'm an ex-CEO, Bennett, I know Stephen very well, so I'm an ex-CEO from the advertising industry. And what I know now compared to what I knew 8 years ago, I mean, it's unbelievable. And yes, of course, I run a culture change business specialized in inclusive and diverse. Of course I do, but that gap is absolutely enormous. But the one thing I can say is once you start filling that gap, is men do start to embrace it, and when they start understanding how their behavior negatively impacts people and actually starts to exclude people, they do shift. I mean, they do change. And so I think a lot of it is about is about creating that gap so that people do understand it, do get engaged. And I do sometimes worry, if I'm honest with you, that the allyship discussion sometimes lets them off because it's and I think so I'm not a big advocate of I think allyship's just one part of it, but I've just seen too many men who have been let off because they've signed, oh my God, I've signed off the budget for a women's group, or I'm sponsoring this woman here. And actually what we need is the only leaders that really can stand forward and be called allies. They should never call themselves allies.
Right.
Are the people who have actually instigated cultural change that has meant the workplace is far more inclusive and gives you the platform for actually driving that diversity that will add the true value to your business.
Alex, I would love to hear an action from you. How do we get men who aren't necessarily leaning in to make the change that we need to see?
Well, I work in the financial industry, and it unfortunately, we're fortunate, out of reality has an image of being a more sort of selfish selfish industry. There's a lot of money involved. I think to bring change, you need leadership from the top. You need to set the examples at the top and show what kind of actions will be recognized and rewarded. And if you don't have that leadership from the top, you can't expect change. And things need to be intentional, and they need to be here and now. Because we say, hey, let's take this slow, let's study, let's learn. We're never going to close the major gaps that exist, within our collective, lifetimes. So, I think, that kind of intentionality, setting, very robust targets, shifting away from, token type of hires. But I listened to this wonderful explanation at an event my boss invited me to, where I learned, the concept of creating a cohort. Just putting diversity into a team is not enough. You need to create a cohort of like people, so you can feel that safety where people can use their voices with confidence and safety. So we really need to intentionally build diversity into our workplace. Leadership needs to hold themselves accountable, set distinct targets, and we need to just go into action mode.
And I think can I just pick up on Alex's point about inclusive leadership, because this gap, I think you mentioned the leadership gap. I mean, we run a piece of research we have done for the last 2 years called Masculinity in the Workplace, and we're now seeing we can actually quantify that gap. So we have 62% of people within employee actual people, and again I think it's the next slide, if we can actually show the slide. Yeah, this is the one. So you actually can see 62% of people in the organization think that empathy is critical to business success. That number actually goes up to 74% when it comes to women. So empathy is clearly something that is needed, and what we're actually seeing is only 19% of people think it's rewarded in that workplace. And if I take the other two, which I think are super important for inclusive leadership, 39% culture intelligence is fundamental to business success. Only 10% think it's rewarded. And then when you go to vulnerability, it's 53% think it's fundamental to business success, but only 3% feel it's rewarded. In fact, 47% of women think it's dangerous to show vulnerability. And actually over 50% think that men are actually taught not to show vulnerability. So we're seeing a huge gap when it comes to the skills.
Just a quick one, Danielle. Do you see resistance? How much resistance do you see when you start talking about vulnerability and emotion? Because it's not as easy as telling people to be empathetic, is it?
No, I mean, listen, but even telling people to be empathetic doesn't mean they've got the skills. These aren't skills that they can be learned, but it takes time to learn them. So the one thing I always say to men, my key skill was to stop thinking your job is to fix everyone's problems. Mm-hmm. You know, actually your job is to stand there and listen to them, give them support so they can fix their own problems. What we need to fix is the culture. And so I think for me, when it comes to vulnerability, I mean, listen, because there's only 4 of us, if I'm on the stage telling that story, I probably, I get much closer to tears. And I think it's really important what we are opening up is by showing our own vulnerability, we're showing other leaders how powerful that vulnerability can be. And that vulnerability doesn't always have to be a personal story. And for a lot of people, it shouldn't be a personal story. That just needs to be accepted. And there was a senator, I can't remember that I think it was one of the senators, I can't remember which one it was, but the guy that had the shipment behind him from China of PPE, and he cried on camera. I mean, that was just literally so powerful to see. And so I think what we're seeing, certainly with COVID, I think we are seeing a different type of leadership. I think there's no coincidence that it's been the female leaders around the world who have actually fared much better in this, because they naturally there are I would love to ungender everything. Let's be really clear. I'd love to head towards a world where we ungender everything and just talk about the skill sets that really happen. But we do have to recognize that because of the society, that there are constraints that are put on men and women around masculinity and femininity, and I think we have started to really see how important inclusive leadership is, and what those traits that have been historically considered female, we shouldn't be going forward. We should be talking about them as the positive traits. We have seen how important they've been in the last 9 months.
Bennett, we've had actions for men, very important, lots of them.
Yeah.
Do you have any actions for women? So is there anything that you feel, any conversations that you need more from women, or a different kind of conversation?
Yeah, I would say I feel like I learned this from my partner a few days ago. Just approach us and encourage us to decenter ourselves in how we can help. Don't just come in all cavalier saying I'm here to save the situation. I think it touches on a bit of what Danielle said. Sometimes we need to know. Sometimes we need to know how to do it, and allowing room for a person to come to you, because this is hard. We're having some hard conversations. You're having some necessary conversations, and it's not easy for us. I feel like the worst person to be giving women advice. But I think just understand that if you find somebody that you consider an ally, or as I like to say, with the shits, really with the opportunities to create good trouble, one, just, you know, do it, like, and two, allow them, or just let them know, like, do not make this about you. Like, make this about us, like, moving forward as, you know, yes, in a situational thing, but also in a societal thing. Because, like, you know, it is going to take people, like, you know, shifting their ego away. I tell a lot of, I've been in the, thank you, Chavi. I'll wrap up. I've had the privilege of telling a lot of leaders, like, leadership requires trust, and trust requires, it requires vulnerability, you know. Do not be afraid, like, if you feel those people are in your life, and you know, we will do our best to make sure that we can show up for you in the way that you deserve.
I love it. Thank you. And I totally put you on the spot there. And so I appreciate such a brilliant response. We have to wrap up, as you know. Thank you. 3 men creating really, really good trouble in your own way. Alex, it's been an absolute honor. Danielle, you've brought so many insights. Bennett, utterly brilliant. Thank you. We need to wrap up now. I have a few things to say, I believe. Thank you for watching, is one of the things I have to say. Please check out all the other topics that we've covered, spanning a number of genres. This event is huge, and there's so many actionable conversations that have taken place. For more fascinating conversations, please visit nonobvious.com. I'm Amy Kean. Thank you for watching, and remember to always stay non-obvious.